I've lived a long time, seen a lot of things, done a lot of things. Most of them I've tried to forget. I've survived childbirth 6 times, buried 3 children, lived through 2 wars, watched the world change in ways I never imagined possible. But there's one thing that still makes me wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. One thing I can still feel in my bones, even now at 88 years old. The pain, the absolute, indescribable, soul-destroying pain of having my teeth pulled without anything to numb it, without anything to help. Just raw, brutal agony while men held me down and ripped teeth out of my skull. People today, they don't know, can't know. They go to the dentist and get injections that make everything numb. They get gas that puts them to sleep. They take pills that dull the pain afterward. They complain about discomfort, about sensitivity, about minor aches. They have no idea, no concept of what dental work was like before all those things existed, before there was any mercy at all, just butchery, just torture, just suffering that went on and on until you thought you'd lose your mind from it. I think about it still, have for 70 years. 70 years since the worst of it happened, and I can still feel it sometimes. Feel that terrible pulling sensation, that crack when the tooth breaks, that grinding when they have to dig out the pieces, that hot copper taste of blood filling your mouth, the terror of not being able to breathe because your mouth is full of blood and broken tooth and you're choking and they won't stop until they're done, until they've gotten what they came for. I was born in 1826, March, cold and wet. My mother said I came out screaming and never really stopped. I was a fussy baby, a difficult child, a woman who spoke her mind too often, but life taught me to scream quieter, to suffer quieter, to endure things in silence because screaming didn't help, didn't change anything, just made people angry, made them call you hysterical, made them hold you down harder. My teeth started causing problems when I was young, maybe 12 or 13 years old. A back tooth on the left side started aching, dull at first, then sharper, then constant, a throbbing that kept me awake at night, made it hard to eat, hard to think, hard to do anything but feel that relentless pulsing pain. My mother gave me clove oil to rub on it, willow bark to chew, whiskey to swish in my mouth. None of it helped much. The pain just got worse and worse until I was crying from it, until I couldn't function, until something had to be done. Father took me to the barber. That's who pulled teeth back then. The barber. Same man who cut hair and shaved beards and let blood when people were sick. He had a room in the back of his shop with a chair bolted to the floor, a wooden chair with arms, with leather straps on the arms and across the chest. I didn't know what those were for until later, until I was sitting in that chair and they were buckling me in, strapping me down like a criminal about to be executed, like an animal about to be slaughtered. The barber was a large man, middle-aged, thick arms and hands like clubs. He looked at me the way a butcher looks at a pig, assessed the problem, told Father it was the back molar, had to come out, no saving it, rotten clear through. Father asked how much. The barber said $2. Father paid, just like that, paid the man to torture his daughter, paid him to strap me down and rip a tooth out of my head while I was fully conscious and could feel every single thing he did. They told me to sit in the chair. I was terrified, shaking. I'd heard stories from other girls, knew it would hurt, but I didn't know how much, couldn't imagine how much. The barber strapped my chest to the chair, tight, so tight I could barely breathe. Then my arms, secured them to the armrests so I couldn't move them, couldn't fight, couldn't protect myself. Father stood behind me, put his hands on my shoulders, said to be brave, said it would be over soon. Said I should think of something pleasant and not scream because it would upset Mother when we got home. The barber had a tool, a horrible tool, like pliers but cruder, rougher. He told me to open my mouth. I did. My whole body was shaking. He shoved his fingers in my mouth, thick, dirty fingers that tasted like tobacco and sweat, felt around until he found the bad tooth. Then he took those pliers and clamped them around it. The metal was cold, hard. I could feel the pressure as he tightened his grip. Getting ready, positioning himself. He braced his other hand against my jaw. His knee came up against the chair between my legs for leverage. Then he pulled, just yanked. Hard. Harder than I thought possible. The pain was immediate, blinding, worse than anything I'd ever felt, worse than anything I could have imagined. It felt like he was ripping my entire jaw off, like my skull was splitting apart, like every nerve in my head was on fire. I screamed, couldn't help it, screamed as loud as I could, but Father's hands pushed down harder on my shoulders, and the barber kept pulling, kept yanking. The tooth wouldn't come out, wouldn't budge, was stuck somehow. So he pulled harder, twisted, wrenched it back and forth. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through my entire head, through my whole body. I heard it crack, heard the tooth break, felt it break. The barber cursed, let go. I was sobbing, blood running down my chin, dripping onto my dress. The pain was still there, still terrible, still consuming my entire world. But the barber wasn't done. The tooth had broken off. He'd only gotten part of it. The roots were still in there, still in my jaw, had to come out or they'd get infected, kill me slowly with blood poisoning. So he had to go back in, had to dig them out. He took a different tool, something smaller, sharper, pushed it into the bleeding hole where the tooth had been, started digging, scraping, trying to get purchase on the remaining roots. I was screaming continuously now, couldn't stop, couldn't control it. The pain was beyond anything, beyond description, beyond endurance. I was choking on blood, gagging on it, trying to spit, but I couldn't move my head. The barber slapped my face, told me to stop moving, told me to hold still or he'd hit me again, harder. Father told me the same thing. Told me to be still, to be quiet, that I was making a spectacle of myself. The barber worked for what felt like hours, was probably 20 minutes, maybe 30, digging in my jaw, pulling out pieces of broken tooth, scraping away infected tissue. My mouth was a raw wound, blood everywhere, pain everywhere. I couldn't think, couldn't see straight. Went somewhere else in my mind, someplace far away from that chair, from that room, from my body that was being butchered. But I could still feel it, still feel every scrape, every dig, every piece he pulled out, still feel Father's hands holding me down, still taste the blood, still smell the barber's sweat, still hear my own screams getting weaker as my voice gave out. Finally, he was done, stepped back, wiped his tools on a dirty rag, told Father it was finished, the roots were out, gave me a wad of cloth to bite down on to stop the bleeding, unbuckled the straps. I couldn't move, could barely breathe, sat there shaking and crying and bleeding while Father paid the man, thanked him for torturing me, for making me suffer beyond anything I thought possible, led me out of that shop and into the wagon and drove me home while I held that bloody cloth in my mouth and wished I was dead. The bleeding didn't stop for hours. The pain didn't stop for days. My jaw swelled up, got infected anyway despite the barber digging everything out, turned purple and green. My face was distorted, unrecognizable. I had fever, chills, was delirious for almost a week. Mother thought I was going to die. The doctor came, male doctor, looked at my jaw, said the barber had done a rough job, but there was nothing to be done now except wait, see if my body could fight off the infection. If it couldn't, I'd die. That was it. That was the only option. Survive or die, nothing in between. I survived. Eventually the swelling went down. The infection cleared, but the pain never fully went away. My jaw ached for months afterward, years afterward. Still aches now sometimes when the weather changes. A reminder, a permanent scar from that day, from that chair, from that torture. I was 12 years old, just a child, and I'd been put through something no human being should ever endure. But that was normal. That was just what happened when you had a bad tooth. You suffered, you screamed, you bled, and if you survived, you were lucky. I lost 3 more teeth over the next 15 years. Each time was the same chair, the same straps, the same brutal pulling and digging and bleeding and screaming. I never got used to it, never became brave about it, just learned to scream quieter, learned to cry less afterward, learned to accept that this was what medical care looked like. This was the best that could be done. This was mercy compared to just letting your teeth rot in your head until the infection killed you. At least the barber got them out. At least you had a chance to survive, even if the process of survival was agony. I got married when I was 19. A farmer named William Carter. Good man, hard-working. His teeth were already going bad by the time I met him. Half of them missing, the other half rotting. He was only 23, but he looked older, looked sick, because he was sick. Dental infections were killing him slowly, making him weak, making him susceptible to every other illness that came along. But he was too afraid to have the bad teeth pulled, too afraid of the pain. I understood. God knows I understood. But I also knew he'd die if he didn't do something. I convinced him to go to the barber, went with him, held his hand while they strapped him into that chair, watched them pull 4 teeth in one session. 4, one right after another, the screaming, the blood, the breaking, the digging, all of it happening over and over. William passed out halfway through, just went limp, unconscious from the pain. I almost envied him. At least he didn't have to feel the last 2. They finished while he was out, left him slumped in that chair with blood running down his face, his mouth a destroyed mess. When he came to, he looked at me with such betrayal, such hurt, like I'd done this to him, like I was responsible for his suffering. But he healed. Got better, stronger. The infections cleared up. He gained weight, got his color back, lived another 30 years because I'd made him get those teeth pulled, because I'd forced him to endure that torture. He thanked me later, years later, said I'd saved his life. But I don't think he ever forgot. Don't think he ever forgave me entirely. How could he? I'd held his hand while they tortured him, watched it happen, let it happen. That's not something you forget, not something you forgive, even when you know it was necessary, even when you know it saved your life. I had my first child in 1846, a daughter, beautiful baby, perfect in every way. But my teeth got worse during the pregnancy. Something about carrying a child leaches calcium from your bones, from your teeth, makes them weak, makes them crack and rot faster. By the time the baby was born, I had 2 teeth that were causing problems, aching constantly, keeping me awake, making it hard to nurse, hard to care for the baby, hard to function at all. William wanted me to have them pulled. I refused, couldn't face it. Couldn't face that chair and those straps and that pain. Not so soon after childbirth, not when I was still healing, still weak, still exhausted from sleepless nights with a newborn. I tried to manage the pain, tried clove oil and whiskey and every folk remedy I'd ever heard of, chewed on one side, avoided hot and cold, prayed it would get better on its own. But it didn't. It got worse. The teeth started abscessing, swelling, poisoning my blood, making me sick, making my milk dry up. The baby was starving because I was too afraid to have my teeth pulled. William didn't ask again, just put me in the wagon one morning and drove me to town, to the barber. I knew where we were going, begged him to turn around, told him I'd be fine, that the teeth would get better, that I just needed more time. He didn't listen, just kept driving, tied the horse up outside the barber shop, carried me inside because I wouldn't walk, wouldn't cooperate, put me in that chair while I was crying and begging and promising I'd be good if he'd just take me home. The barber strapped me down, tighter than before because I was fighting, thrashing, trying to get free. William had to help hold me, had to put his weight on my shoulders to keep me still. I was screaming before the barber even touched me, screaming from fear, from memory, from knowing what was coming, from knowing there was no escape, no mercy, no way out except through the pain. The barber told me to shut up, slapped me hard across the face, said I was being hysterical, said women always were, said I should be grateful he was willing to help me, that some barbers wouldn't work on women at all because they were too difficult, too emotional, too weak. He pulled both teeth, one after the other. Both broke, both required digging, both left me a bloody, sobbing wreck. When it was over, when they finally unbuckled me and let me up, I couldn't stand, couldn't walk. William had to carry me back to the wagon, drive me home, put me to bed where I stayed for 3 days. Couldn't eat, could barely drink, just lay there with bloody rags in my mouth and thought about dying, about how peaceful it would be to just stop hurting, stop suffering, stop enduring one terrible thing after another. But I had a baby, had a daughter who needed me. So I didn't die, just survived, like always, like I'd been doing my whole life. I had 5 more children over the next 12 years, lost more teeth with each pregnancy. It was expected, normal. Women lost teeth when they had babies. That's just how it was. By the time I was 35, I'd lost 9 teeth, had gaps in my smile, looked older than I was, looked worn down, used up. My mouth was a disaster. The remaining teeth were loose, discolored, painful, but I couldn't afford to have them all pulled, couldn't afford the time to recover, couldn't afford to be useless for days or weeks while I healed. I had children to care for, a household to run, work that never stopped. So I lived with the pain, learned to function through it, made it just another part of daily life, like exhaustion, like hunger, like all the other discomforts women were expected to endure without complaint. In 1863, something changed. A dentist moved to town, a real dentist, not a barber, a man who'd studied teeth specifically, who had special tools and techniques, who claimed to be able to pull teeth with less pain, less damage. People talked about him, said he was expensive but worth it, said he was gentler than the barber, said people walked out of his office instead of being carried. I didn't believe it, didn't think anything could make tooth extraction less horrifying, but I had 2 teeth that needed to come out, were causing me constant agony, making my face swell, making me sick. I had to do something. William took me to the dentist. His office was nothing like the barber shop, clean, bright. The chair wasn't bolted to the floor, wasn't fitted with restraints. It reclined, was cushioned. The dentist was young, maybe 30, well-dressed, soft-spoken. He examined my teeth, gentle fingers, didn't shove them in my mouth like the barber did, didn't hurt me just during the examination. He explained what he was going to do, explained that he had something new, something that could help with the pain. Ether, he called it, a gas that would put me to sleep, make me unconscious, make it so I wouldn't feel anything, wouldn't remember anything, would just wake up when it was over. I didn't believe him, thought it was a trick, some lie to get me to sit down willingly, to make me cooperate. But William had heard about ether, said other people had used it, said it really worked. The dentist showed me the equipment, a cloth cone that would go over my face, a bottle of clear liquid that he'd drip onto the cloth. The fumes would put me to sleep. He said it was safe, said I'd wake up fine, said the teeth would be gone and I wouldn't have felt a thing. It sounded too good to be true, sounded impossible, but I was desperate, desperate enough to try, desperate enough to risk it. I sat in the chair. The dentist draped the cone over my face, started dripping the ether. It smelled sweet, chemical, strange, made my head feel light, fuzzy. I could hear the dentist telling me to breathe deeply, to relax, to let it work. I felt myself drifting, floating. The room started to spin. I tried to fight it, tried to stay awake, but I couldn't hold on, fell into darkness, into nothing. And then I was waking up. The dentist was helping me sit up. My mouth hurt, but it was a dull ache. Nothing like the screaming agony I'd experienced before. I was confused, disoriented. Reached up to touch my face. There were 2 bloody gaps where the bad teeth had been. It was done, over, and I hadn't felt it, hadn't experienced the pulling or the cracking or the digging, hadn't screamed or bled or begged, had just slept through the whole thing. I cried, not from pain, but from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that it didn't have to be torture anymore, that there was mercy now, that some brilliant person had invented a way to spare people the agony I'd endured for decades. I cried for the 12-year-old girl who'd been strapped to a chair and tortured, for the young mother who'd been slapped and held down and butchered, for every time I'd suffered through that horror believing there was no other way, no alternative, no hope for anything better, and now there was ether, and it changed everything. But ether was expensive. The dentist charged $5 for an extraction with ether. The barber still charged $2 without it. Most people couldn't afford the difference. Couldn't afford mercy, still had to endure the old way, still had to be strapped down and torn apart while fully conscious. I'd been lucky. William had saved up, had paid extra so I wouldn't have to suffer. But not everyone had that option. Not everyone had a husband who could or would pay for their comfort, for their dignity. for their right to not be tortured. I saw women in town, women I knew, missing teeth, faces swollen from infections. They needed help, needed extractions, but they went to the barber because that's what they could afford. I'd hear about it afterward, about their screaming, their bleeding, their suffering, and I felt guilty that I'd had ether, that I'd been spared, that I'd experienced mercy while they still endured torture. It wasn't fair, wasn't right, but that's how it was. The rich got relief, the poor got pain, same as everything else in life. Over the next 20 years, I had more teeth pulled, always with ether, always at the dentist's office, always at William's expense. Each time I felt grateful. Each time I thought about how much worse it would have been without it. But I also thought about all the years before, all the times I'd suffered, all the pain I'd endured that I didn't have to endure, all the trauma that could have been prevented if ether had existed sooner, if someone had cared enough to invent it sooner. If anyone had thought women's pain mattered enough to try to stop it. By the time I was 60, I'd lost most of my teeth, had a partial set of dentures made, wooden teeth mounted on a metal frame. They didn't fit well, hurt to wear, made eating difficult, made speaking strange. But they were better than nothing, better than being a toothless old woman. Better than looking even older than I already felt. I wore them when we had company, took them out the rest of the time, let my gums rest, let myself be comfortable in my own home at least, even if I couldn't be comfortable anywhere else. William died in 1895, heart attack, quick and relatively painless. I envied him that. The quickness, the lack of suffering. He'd suffered enough in life, deserved an easy death. I was 69, thought I might not have many years left myself, but I kept living, kept going, watched the world change, watched new inventions come, electric lights, telephones, automobiles. Medicine kept improving too. New painkillers, better anesthesia, better dental techniques. Things got easier, better, safer. Young people today, they don't know how good they have it, don't know what it used to be like. I see them complaining about going to the dentist, about minor discomfort, about being numb for a few hours after a filling. They have no idea, no concept. They get injections that make their whole mouth numb before any work is done. They get pills to take afterward. They get x-rays so the dentist knows exactly what he's dealing with before he starts. They get clean instruments, sterile environments, gentle hands, respect, dignity, things my generation never had, things we never even thought to ask for. I try to tell them sometimes, try to explain what it was like, but they don't believe me, think I'm exaggerating, think I'm being a dramatic old woman telling scary stories. They can't imagine it. Can't imagine being strapped to a chair and having teeth ripped out while you're fully conscious and screaming. Can't imagine the pain, the terror, the helplessness. Can't imagine that this was normal, that this was just what happened, that everyone went through it and survived it and learned to live with the trauma of it. But I remember every detail, every moment, every extraction. I remember the barber's dirty hands, the taste of blood, the sound of cracking bone, the feeling of being held down, the humiliation of being slapped for screaming, the fever and infection that followed, the weeks of pain, the permanent damage to my jaw. I remember all of it, carry all of it, will carry it until I die, because you don't forget pain like that, don't forget trauma like that. It stays with you, lives in your body, in your bones, in your nightmares, forever. I'm grateful for the progress. Grateful that young people don't have to suffer like I did, like my generation did, like countless generations before us did. Grateful that someone finally cared enough to invent anesthesia, to make medical care less brutal, less torturous, less traumatic. But I'm also angry. Angry that it took so long. Angry that so many people had to suffer unnecessarily. Angry that pain was considered acceptable for so many years. Especially women's pain, especially poor people's pain, especially anyone who didn't matter to the people who had power and money and education. I lost my last natural tooth when I was 75. Had a full set of dentures made. Better ones this time. They fit better, felt better. I could eat most foods, could speak clearly, could smile without being self-conscious. But they weren't real, weren't mine. I'd lost every single tooth I was born with, lost them to decay and infection and brutal extractions and pregnancies that leached the calcium from my body. My mouth was a graveyard, a testament to suffering, to survival, to endurance. I think about my granddaughters, about their futures, about the dental care they'll receive. They'll never be strapped to a chair, never be tortured, never be told to stop screaming while someone rips teeth out of their head. They'll have x-rays and anesthesia and gentle dentists who treat them like human beings. They'll take it for granted, won't even realize how lucky they are, won't know that their grandmother endured horrors they can't imagine just to have a rotten tooth removed. And that's good. That's how it should be. Progress means the next generation doesn't have to suffer like the last one did. But sometimes I want them to know, want them to understand, want them to appreciate what they have, the mercy they receive, the pain they're spared. I want them to know that medical care wasn't always kind, wasn't always gentle, wasn't always concerned with minimizing suffering, that people used to endure terrible things, unspeakable things, things that would be considered torture now. And we endured them because there was no choice, because the alternative was infection and death, because survival required suffering. And we suffered. God knows we suffered. I see young women at the dentist now, sitting calmly in comfortable chairs, chatting with dentists who explain everything they're doing, getting injections that make everything numb, reading magazines while they wait, walking out smiling, complaining mildly about a sore spot or a slight sensitivity. And I want to shake them, want to tell them how lucky they are, how different it used to be, how much pain they're being spared. But I don't. Just smile and nod. Let them live in their painless world. Let them be grateful without knowing what they're grateful for. Let them be spared the knowledge of what came before, the suffering that paved the way for their comfort. I've made peace with it mostly, made peace with the pain I endured, the teeth I lost, the trauma I carry. It was what it was. I survived it, lived through it, made it to 88 years old despite everything, despite infections that should have killed me, despite procedures that were essentially torture, despite living most of my life in chronic pain from damaged teeth and infected gums and a jaw that was broken and rebroken multiple times during extractions. I survived. And that's something. That's everything, really, because survival was all we had, all we could hope for, and I achieved it, beat the odds, made it when so many others didn't. But part of me is still that 12-year-old girl in the barber's chair, still strapped down, still screaming, still feeling that terrible pulling, that cracking, that pain beyond endurance. She's still inside me, still terrified, still traumatized, still suffering, and no amount of time can erase her, can heal her completely, can take away what was done to her. She's permanent, a scar on my soul, a ghost that haunts me, especially at night, especially when my jaw aches, especially when I see a dentist's office or smell something chemical that reminds me of blood and fear. I'll die with her inside me, die carrying that trauma, that pain, that memory of what it was like when medicine was butchery and pain was expected and suffering was just something you endured because you had no choice. I'll die knowing that I survived something terrible, something that should never have happened, something that happened to millions of people because no one cared enough to make it better sooner. Because pain was acceptable, expected, especially for women, especially for the poor, especially for anyone who didn't matter. That's my legacy. That's what I carry. The memory of dental torture, of extractions without anesthesia, of being held down and torn apart while fully conscious, of screaming until my voice gave out, of bleeding and choking and thinking I was going to die, of infections and fever and pain that lasted for weeks, of losing teeth one by one until I had none left, of a lifetime of suffering that could have been prevented, should have been prevented, but wasn't, because I lived in the wrong time, was born too early, before mercy, before anesthesia, before anyone cared whether medical procedures caused unbearable pain. I'm grateful for the progress, grateful that future generations won't suffer like I did, won't be traumatized like I was, won't carry the scars I carry, but I'm also bitter that I had to suffer, that my suffering was considered acceptable, normal, necessary, that no one tried to spare me, to protect me, to make the inevitable less horrible. I was just a woman, just poor, just someone who didn't matter enough for anyone to care about my pain. And I carry that knowledge, that understanding that my suffering didn't matter, that I didn't matter, not enough to be spared, not enough to be treated with dignity, not enough to be given mercy. That's the truth about medical care in my time. That's what it was really like. Not the sanitized version, not the nostalgic stories about simpler times and family doctors who made house calls, the brutal truth, the painful truth, the truth that we suffered, we endured, we survived, but we were damaged, traumatized, scarred, and we carried that damage for the rest of our lives. I carried it, still carry it, will carry it to my grave. The 12-year-old girl who was strapped to a chair and tortured, the young mother who was slapped for screaming, the woman who lost every tooth in her head, one agonizing extraction at a time. She's still here, still inside me, still suffering, still remembering, still carrying the weight of pain that should never have been inflicted. That's my story. That's what dental care was like when I was young. That's what it meant to need medical help before anesthesia, before mercy, before anyone cared whether the cure was worse than the disease. And I'll remember it until the day I die. Remember every moment, every extraction, every scream, every drop of blood, every piece of broken tooth, every infection, every fevered night wondering if I'd survive. I'll remember all of it, and I'll take it with me when I go. Take that 12-year-old girl. Take her pain, take her terror, take her trauma, take all of it into whatever comes next, because it's part of me now, forever. Can't be separated, can't be healed, can't be undone, just carried, endured, survived, like everything else in my long, hard life. That's what it meant to be born in 1826. That's what it meant to need dental care. That's what it cost, and I paid it over and over for my entire life, and I'm still paying it, still carrying the cost, still bearing the weight, and I'll carry it until my last breath. That's my story, the real story, the hard story, the true story, and I'm one of the last ones who remembers what it was really like, what it really meant, what it really cost. When I die, that knowledge dies with me, and maybe that's for the best. Maybe the world doesn't need to remember how brutal it used to be, how painful, how merciless. Maybe it's better to let it fade, let it be forgotten, let future generations live without knowing what their ancestors endured, what we survived, what we carried. But I'll remember until my last moment. I'll remember, and that girl will be with me, that 12-year-old in the chair, still strapped down, still screaming, still suffering, still enduring what no child should ever have to endure. She'll be there, at the end, waiting for me, and maybe then, finally, after all these years, after all this suffering, after all this carrying and enduring and surviving, maybe then she'll be able to rest. Maybe we both will. That's all I have left to hope for. Rest, peace, an end to the pain, an end to the remembering, an end to carrying what I've carried for 76 years. That's what I'm waiting for now. That's all that's left. The end, and the hope that when it comes gently, painlessly, mercifully, unlike everything else I've endured, unlike the dental care of my youth, unlike the life I've lived. Let it be gentle, let it be painless, let it be over. That's my final wish, my final hope. After a lifetime of suffering, let the end be kind. That's all I ask. That's all I have left to ask for. Kindness, mercy, peace. Finally, at last, after all these years,